Welcome, welcome. Lovely to see you. Please do, if you can, put on your camera, because I'm sure Abu would appreciate being able to see you during his presentation. A very quick intro. Abu is a friend of ours in the ANLP community, and is an NLP trainer. We met Abu many years ago and have done many Zoom things together, haven't we, Abu? So we're very grateful for you being here today and delivering your virtual workshop on Virtuoso Voices, Commanding Excellence in Virtual Speaking. And Abu mentioned that there's no slides today because that's the whole point. It's virtual speaking. So I'm going to hand you over to Abu, and I'm going to turn off my video because we have a really poor internet at the moment. So apologies, Abu, I'm here in spirit.
No worries. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So good to see you here. Can I just check with all of you? A thumbs up will be all right. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. So as Karen has already said, my name's Abu Yusra. I'm an NLP trainer. I have been doing this NLP for about 20 years, but I've been public speaking for nearly 35 years. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you today. And before I start, I wanted to say that it's an absolute honor and my great thanks to Karen, to Cash, to Shannon, and the ANLP family for helping to make this event happen. And it's actually an honor to be speaking in front of an august audience like yourselves. So thank you very much for sparing your time and for being here. And I hope that we'll enjoy each other's company for the next hour or so. I will be taking questions, but I'd prefer to take them at the end, please. So if you note your questions down or even put them in the chat box, I hope Cash and Karen can look after them for me and maybe help me out with those as to what comes up. But I'd prefer to do that at the end rather than in the talk itself. So bear that in mind, please. So I'm a public speaker. I got into public speaking by default, really. I was involved in, I used to go to the mosque, madrasa school when I was younger. And in the madrasa schools, we have various presentations at things like Eid and, other festivities. And it's always an aim of the mosque leaders to have their kids showcase what's happening in the mosque. And I always used to get selected for some reason to do that. So I started very young. But I remember my first proper public speech was as a 17-year-old. And I had my handkerchief sticking in my top pocket, sticking out my top pocket, like that triangle thing you get, like a dress sense. And as I started doing the talk, I got so nervous and I started sweating. And on camera, I was too embarrassed to bring the handkerchief out. So I kept on touching it, pulling it, tugging it, but not taking it out. And then I thought, oh, what the hell? I've got to dry my sweat. So I pulled it out and I did it, and I felt so much better for it. And when I look back at that video now, I really, really cringe that this is where I was. And I hope that I'm in a much better place now. And I hope that I can share with some of those experiences that I've had with yourselves. I'm a public speaker for various things, especially for NLP. I have hosted events as well. And I'm also a consultant for NLP and related things. And my expertise in this comes from trial and error, but also from the fact that I was fortunate enough when I was in my previous job to have gone on a public speaking course run by a very famous actor who has since passed away. And he shared a lot and he gave me a lot of information and a lot of confidence actually to go out there and to be who I wanted to be in terms of delivering my message. So today's purpose is about explaining and sharing something with you about mastering virtual speaking in today's remote first world. And the impact of virtual presence on professional success is simply that in a remote world, your virtual presence is often your first impression and sometimes your only impression. First and sometimes only impression. So whether you're leading a team, pitching a proposal, running a training, the ability to connect and convey confidence through a screen directly impacts what we do as a trainer. And it doesn't just impact, but that then becomes your competitive edge. And without it, even the most brilliant ideas risk sometimes being lost in a sea of digital noise. It's also important because we have to overcome what I call the engagement crisis. Virtual environments come up with unique challenges. Attention spans shrink, engagement drops, and distractions multiply. For example, you may have your phone on silent, but it may start ringing and it might be in your line of vision, and therefore you can't help but look at it because the screen's come on. Or somebody comes and knocks on the door. And I'm lucky right now that it's school time, because otherwise my 8-year-old would definitely come in and introduce himself in his Marvel pajamas. And so these distractions happen all the time. But for those who master the art of virtual speaking, these challenges become opportunities. And by commanding attention and fostering connection through your voice, through verbal imagery and presence, you not only are able to hold the room, but to inspire action. And in this digital age, to engage virtually determines whether your message sticks or gets forgotten the moment that this call ends. So the purpose of the talk, therefore, is to explore how we can use cutting-edge techniques, which are well known to people in the NLP world, but don't always get to be used in that manner, to master the art of virtual speaking by leveraging what I called in the promo for this event, the 3 V's: voice, visual, and virtual presence. And these skills are critical for engaging, persuading, and leading in digital environments. So we're going to look at all 3 of these, but just before we do that, I wanted to check. There's a need for this training. And although most of you who are in the NLP world will probably already be used to being public speakers or being used to leading trainings of this sort, there's always things we can learn from one another. And one of the things that I hope that I learn is that from your feedback, from your questions, there may be things that I need to take away and I need to learn, because we're all on a learning journey. Nobody's perfect and nobody's done it. But there is a changing landscape of communication. And what we need to do, therefore, is we need to highlight and we need to understand that there's a growing reliance on virtual communication across industries. And we'll discuss some of the common challenges, which include lack of engagement, Zoom fatigue, and also sometimes miscommunication. Always happens. So the first one that I mentioned just there was lack of engagement. And in my research in preparing for this event, I came across an amazing statistic from the website Bubbles. And they said that a staggering 92% of employees or participants admit to multitasking during virtual meetings. And this multitasking is not just that they're doing some work, perhaps, or they're making notes, but the multitasking actually means that they're playing games on their phone or on another screen on the computer, or engaging with members of their family, perhaps, or their colleagues who are the other side of the camera, which can't be seen. So sometimes you see people mouthing something and you don't know what they're doing, but they're actually talking to people on the other side. So multitasking and disengagement is a real factor in virtual speaking. And it shows how crucial it is to capture and maintain attention in a virtual setting. In terms of Zoom fatigue, meeting fatigue, 38% of remote workers report that daily virtual meetings are exhausting, leading to a reduced engagement over time. And so what we need to do is perhaps look about balancing meeting frequency and interactivity to keep our participants engaged. And a final statistic that I'll share with you just for now is that a staggering 67% of employees, not as high as 92%, but 67% of employees or participants in meetings feel that virtual meetings are as productive as in-person meetings, but only when there is good and quality interaction. So it's no good just sitting in front of a screen, just reading off slides, or just talking to people. We have to imagine that we're in front of them almost as if we are there in person. So we use all the techniques and skills we learn as NLPers and as trained public speakers to engage even our virtual audience. And that is really important, because what that means is these statistics that I've just shared, 92% multitasking or doing other things, 38% saying that there's daily fatigue that goes on, 67% wanting the meetings to be more interactive. All of these emphasize the need for a change in strategies to ensure high engagement and effective participation. So why excellence matters in virtual speaking is because in virtual environments, your ability to captivate and connect things hinges on more than just words. Hinges on more than just words. To truly excel, you must master how you deliver your message. And it's that's going to form the bulk of my talk today. We're going to introduce the 3 V's, the visual, the voice, and the virtual, as a framework for commanding attention and, most importantly, inspiring action. Because you can motivate people, but can you motivate them to do what they need to do what you want them to do something they need to do for themselves? That is another level of skill that we're going to go for. And at this moment, I'm going to ask Cash to put in that question into the chat field, which I'd prepared previously. And I'd like to see your answers, please. So what's your biggest challenge in virtual communication? I'll give you a few moments to allow you to get your answers in there. So Samina says slowing down. Samina, what do you mean by that? Can you just expand on your answer? Lisa, lag and people speaking over one another. That's a real problem, that is, especially when you've got people from different time zones or people with not good connections. Okay. And Lisa Bryce says, keeping the engagement levels up. Thank you, Lisa. That's a great one. And I hope that by the end of today, you'll have got some techniques and tips to help you to engage that. Michelle, knowing who is engaged apart from those speaking. That's really important. And this is why one of the things that I always do in my talks when I give them is actually insist on people having their cameras on. Because if you don't have the camera on, I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know whether it's just a picture and you're off having a coffee upstairs or whatever you're doing. Tech issues, Linda, thank you. Broadband stability. That's a real big one. And Karen and Cash and I were just discussing before we came online that that's a real issue right now for Cash and Karen. Hopefully it won't be during the meeting. Linda says that moving away from the initial chit chat and getting down to the reason for the meeting, really important. And that's why it's important for speakers to have an agenda so you know what you're doing and you can speak to it. Samina says, I'm a fast speaker. Samina, are you talking about me or yourself? I'm sure you're saying you're a fast speaker, but from what I know of you, you've actually improved so much more over the last few months and years. And Lucy says, reading body language and noticing non-verbal reactions. And we have a couple of others as well. So that's a number of really good reasons of why we need to master virtual communication, because these are challenges that are very real and challenges that we face. So let's begin then on that front. The first V in the 3 V's is the voice, the power of sound. And why does this matter? You see, in virtual meetings, voice is a primary tool for conveying emotion, authority, and clarity. Since physical presence is limited, especially if people have their cameras off or are not, or got a placeholder in place, then vocal variety, your tone, your pitch, and your pacing becomes essential to maintaining engagement. And it commands attention. If you have a well-modulated voice, you keep listeners intrigued and you help to emphasize key points. Strategic use of pauses, did you see what I did there? Allows the audience to process information and anticipate your next point. And finally, how it inspires action is that a dynamic voice conveys confidence and urgency, compelling the audience to act. For instance, emphasizing action-oriented phases like "let's get started" can energize participants. And you may and may or not have noticed that just before we started on this aspect, I said, right, let's start then. So we have to put these learnings into practice, and then we'll actually see just how much they matter and how much they help in what we're doing. So that was the voice. It matters, it commands attention, and it inspires action. But we also have visuals. Now, in the context of this talk, I've deliberately not prepared slides, deliberately not sharing any slides, because I wanted to show you proof to myself, first of all, and then to show you that we can actually hold the attention of the audience with the way we use our voice. And the way you use your voice for visuals is by creating mental imagery. It matters because while visual tools like slides can enhance understanding, even without them, verbal visuals, descriptive language and storytelling can help paint vivid pictures in the listener's mind. And if you have access to your listener's mind, they're going to keep engaged with you. They're going to stay engaged with you. Creating mental imagery commands attention because the evocative descriptions that you may use engage the imagination. And keeping participants mentally present is key. For example, describing a concept as a lighthouse in a storm makes it memorable. Normally we have it the other way around. But a lighthouse in a storm makes us think that, there is something that stands out in everything that's going around, and you focus in on that one thing that stands out, or two things, or three things, as it may be. And it inspires action by stories and analogies that resonate emotionally and encourage people to relate the content of their own experiences, increasing the likelihood that they'll take action. So visuals can be created using mental imagery, using your words and your voice. And we'll do a little bit more work on that in just a few minutes. And thirdly, the third V, virtual presence. Own the digital stage. Virtual presence is about how you project energy, confidence, and authenticity through the screen. It compensates for the lack of physical cues that naturally establish authority in person. And how does it command attention? First of all, eye contact, looking directly at the camera. And sometimes we have this problem that when we're actually presenting online, our cameras are sometimes at the top of the screen, sometimes at the bottom, sometimes on the side, and you're looking at your screen for your slides to know what you're going to do next, and you lose that eye contact. I sometimes find myself that if I've got the gallery view on, I'm actually looking at my participants to see how they're doing. But in looking at them on my screen, I'm losing the eye contact with them that I have when I'm looking at my camera. And so one of the best tools that I've recently discovered, and I don't have it right here with me, is actually a miniature camera that hangs off the top of your screen and sits in the middle of your screen. So even if you're looking around your screen, it looks as if you're looking at the camera and your eye contact is maintained. If you can find something like that, I strongly suggest you get it because it's really, really helpful and really useful. Because when you look directly at the camera and you make eye contact and you use open gestures and an engaged posture, all of these things signal attentiveness and invite reciprocal focus from the audience. And this is simply what we know in NLP as matching and mirroring. If you present yourself in a certain way, your audience will respond to you in that way as well. It inspires action. Virtual presence inspires action because a strong virtual presence builds trust and rapport, making your calls to action more persuasive. And when participants feel connected, they're more likely to commit to your proposed steps. And so the conclusion of the 3 V's is that these together, used well together, ensure your message is heard and seen in the mind's eye and felt in the heart. By mastering these elements, you can turn passive listeners into active participants, driving engagement and inspiring meaningful outcomes. So now we're going to move on to the meat of the training, as it were. And there is going to be some involvement here from all of you. So it's not just all about me presenting. It's about you getting involved as well. But I promise you, nothing too major and nothing too testing. But let's start. So the voice of power. And the concepts here are of vocal variety, tone modulation, pacing, and pauses. And the exercise that I would like to share with you is, Cash, is it possible to see everybody? Please see them in the gallery. And at this moment, if people are in the gallery, it'd be really helpful if you could perhaps switch your camera on, because I can then gauge a little better what we're doing. So I'm going to give a simple sentence, and I want you to experiment and to listen carefully and to give me some feedback on the different emphases that I make. So for this exercise, is it okay with the participants here if I pick on one person? Would that be okay with you guys? And if you're not willing to do it, I'm happy to move on to the next person on my screen as I see them. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. I can see a lot of nodding heads, so thank you very much. So, Victoria, can I go with you first? If that's okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for volunteering. So, Victoria, I'm going to give you a sentence, and the sentence is very simple. I'm going to say it in a particular way firstly, and I want you to just experiment and listen and see where the emphasis, and tell me what that means to you. And then we'll do the next part, okay? So the first sentence is, this is an important message. What did you feel from that? What did you gain from that?
It was drawing my attention to what was coming next. This is an important message, as something was to follow. Okay,
thank you. I'm going to repeat the same sentence again, but slightly differently. And then again, I'd like your feedback on how that feels. This is an important message.
Okay. So that was bringing me more present with that sentence, with this sentence.
Sure, sure. Third variation, are you ready? This is an important message.
Again, I think that's here and now. This is here. This is important.
Sure.
This is a. Yeah.
This is, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Victoria. And I'll not challenge you again now for the time being, but thank you very much for participating. Let me pick another volunteer. Can I pick on you, Tony? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Great, thanks. So Tony, we're going to carry on with that same experiment, but I'm going to use a slightly different sentence. And I just, again, want you to just listen and tell me what you think, what feelings you get from what I say. It's a rather dull day.
I didn't notice an emphasis on anything. I noticed kind of a consistent tone throughout the whole sentence. You weren't emphasizing any single part of it.
Sure, sure. Okay. Same sentence again. It's a dull day.
Well, you're really emphasizing the word dull, so that's drawing my attention to that word, and it's going to cause me to think about the day. And do I agree with that? And yeah, it's really highlighting that part of the sentence.
Excellent, excellent. Just for the rest of you, thank you, Tony. Just for the rest of you, just in your own mind, and if you want, put the answers on chat. That second part, it's a dull day. How did that actually make you feel? I'd love to see your answers coming up on chat, please. Pulls everything downwards, feel dull. I'm sorry, not my intention. Yeah, Linda Chamberlain says it brings me down. Lisa says it makes it a bit depressed. And that's exactly right. And that's what happens. But you see, what we also realize is that when we're doing this, when we're speaking that, when we're putting that different emphasis on words, we're actually painting a picture. We're actually having an impact on our audience. So it's not just me trying to emphasize different words just for the sake of it, but there's a reason, there's a purpose behind that. And that purpose is that when I use those words in those different intonations with different voice tone, perhaps with different pitch, then it actually helps to shift the meaning of the sentence with the tone and the emphasis that I use. So that's the first part, the power of your sound, and how vocal variety, even in very simple sentences, can actually make you feel completely differently about what you're hearing. Let me just look at some of the chat that's coming up. So Lucy here says that the weather really affects your mood. Indeed. And again, I'm sorry if that was a bad choice, but it's important to get that. So thank you, Lucy. Helen, I felt your observation and your feeling about it. Very true. And thank you, Helen, for noticing that. And that's what I would expect. That's what I would hope to instill in my audience by doing that. Samina says it affects states, Milton model states. And Sue Fraser says, makes me think about dull and whether I agree or do I feel differently. Exactly right, Sue. So it's making you think and it's making you engaged. And that's the whole purpose behind this. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for now. Cash, you can put me back on Spotlight if you want, because I'm going to move on a little bit. And we're going to move on to the second part, which is visuals and making messages stick without visual aids. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say something. I'm going to use some words, use some sentences. And I want you all just to listen, to pay attention, to hear what's being said. And what I'd like you to do then is I'd like you to put in the chat again, just your feelings, just your thoughts. And after I've seen some of those thoughts come up, I'll come back to the crowd and I'll ask one or two people some specific questions based on what you've written. Okay, so Cash, in a few minutes, we might need the gallery again, if that's okay. Right, so are you ready, guys? Here we go. And when I went to the safari in South Africa, the Kruger Safari, it was one of the best holidays and the best experiences of my life. The weather was absolutely glorious. Sun beating down, but not too hot. A dusty environment because we were in the jungle. A collection of some trees here, of some rocks, some water. And because we were in a safe car, we could actually see some of the animals coming to quench their thirst. You had the lions crouching down and slurping up the water. And you had the deer very much aware of the lions and therefore going around the other side of the pond and quickly taking a few sips and then looking up again, making sure nobody's approaching them. And then you had the birds flying down and perching right on the king's, the lion's back, and then flying off and perching on the deer's back. It was a beautiful day, so serene, so quiet, except for the occasional sounds of the animals. Can you just put in the chat, please, what you got from that? What did you hear? Linda's come up there really quick saying, beautiful visual and auditory images. I would like to be there. Linda, I'll happily go again. Tony, he said, to me, the pauses were too long and it felt unnatural and disjointed. Didn't take me into any different state. Thank you for that, Tony. I appreciate that. Sue, I heard the lapping of the water as the animals were drinking. Helen said, peaceful feeling, enjoy the imagery, could imagine the sounds in the heat. And again, Linda has said, strong visuals, strong sounds. Wendy Soper says, very factual, but I wasn't convinced. Thank you for that, Wendy. And Helen says, I like the pauses too. It made me anticipate the next bit. And Lisa Bryce says, took me right back to when I went on safari and did my version of lions drinking in the water. So thank you for all of that. So Cash, can we go back to the gallery, please? And I'm going to go with Lisa Bryce, if that's okay, because Lisa's been on safari previously. So we have a shared experience there, Lisa, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Lisa, what I would like to know from you, please, is as I was delivering those words, And it was completely natural. It was completely off the top of my head. I hadn't prepared. It's not written down anywhere. As I was delivering those words, could you perhaps tell us what you were seeing in your mind's eye?
So I saw a watering hole. So to begin with, when you started talking about the initial environment, I had a picture of a sort of like an early morning sunrise, and it being quite dusty and a bit misty.
Mhm.
And then when we got to the lion bit, we'd seen them coming down to a watering hole, like a big pride of lions. So I kind of went to kind of my own version of
Mhm.
that, because we didn't have any deer there. So then I had to imagine the deer. But there was a bird that sat on the back of one of the lions. So I was kind of creating and remembering.
Mm. And thank you for that. And that's really interesting because, again, the point here is that as I was giving my descriptions in the audience, and especially for Lisa, her own memories were coming to mind. And that is really good engagement. When you can take your audience on a trip, on a journey with you, and they can imagine themselves in that position, then that's where your imagery is really working. That's where your words are really working. And we did that without any slides, without any pictures, but just painting the words that we were talking about, using pauses where applicable, using gestures where applicable, and also the voice incantation, the tone incantation. So that is an important lesson to learn from that. And what we also remember, what this causes, is that the more vivid you can paint a picture, the more real the experience will be of your audience. So make sure that visual imagery, even without visual aids, remember that that's a really powerful thing. And this is something we can practice and improve as we go along. There's a question here from Samina, and I did say I'm not going to take questions, but this is relevant to this particular point. What if someone isn't a visual person? Storytelling, sorry, I couldn't make sense of that question. So perhaps if you could type it out again, Samina, and make it a bit more clearer, then I'll be happy to help with that. So the third thing that we're going to move on to then is visual presence, owning the digital room. Now, this is perhaps the most key element of any virtual presentation. It's about the person who's speaking, gaining and keeping everybody's attention. Cash, you can go back to the spotlight if you wish. Thank you. Maintaining eye contact and focusing on the camera is really important. And what I said earlier was when we look around the room, when we look around on our screen, when we look at things that we have to look at as our prompts may be, it takes us away from that connection. Now, you don't want to be sitting there just staring at the camera because that makes other people feel unnatural and uneasy. But you do want to have, just like you would in a room, now and again, you want to look at somebody directly because you'll begin to engage with them. And once they engage, the people around them will begin to engage as well because it feeds through to them. And using deliberate, purposeful gestures is really important. When I was describing that story, I was talking about the expanse. I was talking about the dusty environment. I was talking about the animals, and I was painting pictures for you of how they were drinking and what they were doing. All of these bring different elements to different people. And I can guarantee you that everybody in the room would have had their own personal imagery based upon what I was saying. Because we are all individuals. We don't all see the same thing. Sometimes we see things a little bit differently. And that's okay because that's your experience of that reality, of that story. And we have to maintain our vocal energy to project confidence. I've seen many speakers, and I'm sure you have too, who'll come on, who'll do a presentation. They may be absolute experts on their subject, but they speak in a very monotonous voice. And as they carry on speaking, within a few minutes, they begin to lose people's interests. And sometimes their slides actually represent also the way they speak, very monotone slides, maybe gray and black, maybe white and green or something like that. But we have to get out of that habit, and we have to make sure that we engage with our audience using our voice. We pause, we let them think, we ask questions, we ask them to interact, we ask them to put things in chat. But what I've also found, and I think perhaps some of you may have experienced this also, is that when you do go into a larger group when on a virtual talk, there are many people sometimes they actually go over the top. Hey, who's here? Give me a 1. Put a 1 in the chat box. Next minute, put a 2 in the chat box. This is what you're feeling. And that over exuberance sometimes can also be tiring and can also make people feel a bit uneasy. So keeping a balance is the main thing. And remember, maintain eye contact by focusing on the camera, not 100% of the time, but quite regularly. Use deliberate, purposeful gestures to help to keep people's attention, and maintain vocal energy to project confidence and your message as well. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to do a round robin activity. Okay, so Cash, if we go back to gallery, please. Thank you. And I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask 2 or 3 volunteers just to say something. I'm going to give you a question and I want you to give your answer. And as you give the answer, I want all of us just to make our own notes. And those notes should be about what was good, what were they doing out of the things I've suggested. So for example, were they using their voice projection well? Were they using tonal incantations well? Were they looking at the camera or were they looking somewhere else? Just maybe these 3 points, and just make your own notes. And if you can, share them in the chat. So the first person I'm going to pick on for this is, if you don't mind, Cash, is you.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Fine.
Yeah. So Cash, can you give me a 1-minute response, please, to the question, describe your favorite place?
My favourite place is actually my new home, which we've just moved into. And the reason it's a beautiful place is what drew us to the place is it's called Avalon. Karen and I have a connection through a book called The Mists of Avalon. So when we saw it, that drew us to it. We have the vistas before us.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our first sunrise a couple of days ago after the gloomy weather that we've had over the past few days in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw the sunrise and the different colours of the skies. I took a wonderful picture of a squirrel that sat on the garden wall this morning out the back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I let the cat out, and she wasn't supposed to be let out yesterday. So there was a frantic scurrying around at 11 o'clock at night whilst we looked for the cat.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst I was being berated for letting the cat out, rightly so, but I was being berated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a wonderful place to be. There's a lot of peace here, and there's a great butcher's just up the road. So for me, that helps. That helps enormously.
Sure. Thank you very much for that, Cash. Thank you. So put it in the chat. What did you think of his little story there? A really wonderful story. What did you think about some of the things we've suggested about eye contact, about voice projection, about voice incantation? What were your thoughts on that? And what did he make you feel? How did he make you feel? So Tony says, very natural and engaging. Pauses felt natural and not contrived. Good camera engagement. Thank you, Tony. Sue says, great use of humor. And Lucy says, I believed Cash. There you go, Cash. Linda said, rich in detail, fun and interesting. And it was a real experience. And that was interesting because, again, I also felt that it was a real experience. He was describing something that's actually just happened. They've just moved into a new house and he's describing why he actually loves it. And Linda Chamberlain says, backs that up by saying it felt authentic. So Cash, thank you very much. Thank you for that input. I'm also going to ask Karen now, if I may. Are you there, Karen? Are you able to talk?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. So Karen, could you please, again, give me a 1-minute response to this question? What was your first experience of NLP?
My first experience of NLP was actually out of complete ignorance, because I was flicking through in the olden days when we had evening classes, I was flicking through the brochure at Barnet College, and it said 6-week introduction to neurolinguistic programming. And that was it. And I thought, well, that's either something really interesting about computer programming. I'd just done a course on C++, because why not? And I thought it's either going to be computer programming or it might be personal development. I don't really know. So I signed up for it anyway, and here we are 20 years later.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for that, Karen. Really appreciate it. Again, let's have some more answers. How did that make you feel? What was Karen's engagement like? What was the story like? How did it make you feel? And I can say right at the outset that Karen, it made me remember my time of my first interaction with NLP. It was with a course tutor, nothing to do with NLP, but he was using NLP in order to keep us engaged. By the way, Cash, you've got lots of people here wondering whether the cat ever came back.
Yes, she did.
Yeah. So Linda says that was fun, interesting, smiling, very engaging. Tony says the biggest thing I noticed was Karen's smile, and that was the best engagement factor. So well done. Thank you, Tony. Lisa Kenyon says engaging, reflective, good hand gestures. That's a very good thing to pick up, the hand gestures. And that's why they're important, even on a screen. Now, sometimes where I sit when I'm doing my talks, I'm too close to the camera to do my hand gestures. So if I have to make some hand gestures, I always make sure that I move slightly back, and then people are able to see what I want to do with my hands. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You don't have to be rooted to one spot. Just like they tell you in actual public speaking, don't be rooted to the spot, move around if you can. That shows engagement. It shows also that you're in a relaxed frame of mind, and that allows people to take on more of what you're saying as well. Victoria Bromwich says, connection with the audience through looking at the camera. A lovely smile, Karen, from Victoria. Thank you. And Lisa Bryce says, smiling and hand gestures made it engaging. So great, thank you. And all of this feedback put together both for Karen and for Cash tells us one thing, that every aspect of what we do on camera in an interactive virtual session is important. Whether it's the eye contact, whether it's the words, whether it's a tonal incantation, or whether it's the emphasis that you put in certain places, and how you look. Don't always be dead serious. Slip in a joke here and there, have a smile, and make yourself vulnerable. And that's what people love, because that's what people feel. That's what the audience feels. So coming to the end of the presentation now, just want to reinforce the 3 V's. And I want to do it in this way. So voice, visual, and virtual presence. And I've summarized it in this manner. Voice gives life to your message. Your visuals, your mental visuals, they anchor it because it helps people to remember their experiences. And your virtual presence ensures that your message lands. So voice, visuals, and virtual presence. And what I would like you to do, ladies and gentlemen, going forward, is in your next virtual presentation, apply at least one, but as many of these techniques, and feedback if you can. Feedback through the ANLP, email me directly. I'm happy for my email address to be shared, Cash, if you have it. Otherwise, it's yusratraining@gmail.com. I'll be happy to have it. And I'm happy to give people any advice if you want to send me any videos about your presentation or your speaking, not about the presentation content, but about how you did it. I'm happy to provide some feedback on that as well. Because I've really learned from people giving me feedback. I've really engaged from people who have actually been authentic in their interaction with me. And I'd like to offer the same back. As I say, it's time to give back as well. But ladies and gentlemen, my final thoughts on this, before I go to the Q&A, is that virtuoso speaking is an ongoing journey. The better we master these techniques and elements, the more impact we create. And at the end of the day, that's why we do things, to create impact and to leave a lasting impression. And so I'd like to invite you all to either ask your questions or to share your reflections on the mic, please, rather than just in the chat. But in the meantime, thank you for all the comments you've put and the messages you put. I'm happy to engage with you further. Lisa says, delighted I was able to join live. Thank you. And thank you, Lisa, for joining. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. And everybody else for that matter. Any questions? If people have questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, please feel free to add your comments. And one thing I will say, please, is if you can, because as you know, feedback is important to us. So I'm just going to put a link in here for a feedback form in the chat. If you can click on that link and give me some feedback, leave some feedback, I'd really appreciate that. Tony, you've raised a hand, sir, so please go ahead.
Yes, Abu, thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
for being
time.
here.
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
I spent a long time going to a public speaking group to learn a lot about how to do public speaking. And I 100% agree with everything you're saying about learning how to use the voice in a more powerful way. One of the things I observed at the speaking group was that the people who were quote unquote the best speakers who won the competitions were so good, that they were so polished, that to me, they actually lost connection with the audience, and being too polished got in the way. So my question is, how would you suggest that we can improve these qualities in our voice, the powerful voice, but without getting to that point where we become so focused on leaving pauses and painting word pictures that we actually lose connection?
Yeah, Tony, that's a great question, a really good question. And before I answer your question, I can just share a little story with you. I've only ever been to one Toastmasters event, and that was in Birmingham back in 2014. And I remember it very clearly because I'd been encouraged to go to Toastmasters, you know, for the public speaking aspect of it. But various reasons and engagements, whatever, I never actually managed to actually become a member. But I went to this one event because I got my son enrolled and I was interested in him becoming a public speaker. And of course, you know, they do the table topics. And so my son had introduced me at the registration desk as a public speaker. So at the table topics, I was one of the ones selected to actually do a presentation. And at my only attendance ever at a Toastmaster, I won the Speaker of the Night and the table topic speaker. So I won that. And I asked for feedback from various people who I didn't know because it's the first time I'd been. And they actually said something to me, which actually is a direct answer to your question. They said that people could feel that they could feel me. They could understand who I was, that I wasn't somebody who was off another planet, to use somebody's feedback. And I think the way to do that with yourselves and when we go to present is actually just make your best effort not to be perfect. Because although perfection is good, it, as you said, can also be off-putting to those who are still learning, those who still want to come a long way. And in one of the slides at the end, I also used the word be vulnerable, be open to that. Let people ask you questions and actually say things that you don't know and be open about that. One of the things I do when I present and it comes to question and answers, I always say to people, ask me any question you like, but I don't know all the answers. And I'm happy to find out what I don't know, and that helps me grow as well. And people love that. It's a very simple statement, but they love it because I'm actually showing them that I'm vulnerable. I'm not the finished article, and I'm not saying, hey, look at me and do it my way. It's not my way. It's do it in a way that suits you best. But these are some techniques that will help you on the way. I hope that answers your question, Tony. Thank you. Any other questions? Helen, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's more about position on the screen. So somebody told me once that ideally you want your eye line to be in the top third of the screen. Because when you're sort of down, hang on, I'll tilt my screen. When you're sort of talking from here, you kind of lose your presence and your impact, don't you?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And actually, Helen, this is part of what they teach you in photography. That when somebody's taking a portrait of a person, when a photographer is taking a portrait, they always zoom in on the pupils first and then zoom out, because that then gives them a perfect appearance of the face. And it's the same thing with the camera. Now I have my camera at eye level. Can you see where I'm pointing? That's where my camera is right in my eye level. Yeah, so I'm trying to be in the top third. And as you said, if you tilt it too far up, then although my screen is blurred at the moment, can you see that it becomes too bland? It's not engaging. And if I tilt it down, well, nobody wants to see what my waistline looks like. Yeah. But so this is really important. The top third is actually the right place to be. And one of the best ways you can do that is actually position your camera so that it's your eye level. And that will help. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Helen?
Yes, it does. And I think the other thing as well is how close to the camera, because some people seem to sit really far back and then they're like a tiny little thing in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, yeah. The way you are sat right now, Helen, is the perfect place. I can see enough of you. I can see enough of your surroundings, but I'm still focusing on you. In the setup that I've got in this room, and I say embarrassingly, and about me being vulnerable and not perfect, I'm actually a bit too close to the screen. But I've had a little problem with my eyes recently, and therefore I can't see my screen clearly, so I've had to sit myself a little bit closer. But hopefully as the eyes get better, my preferred position is around here. Yeah. Thank you, Helen. Thank you for that question. Really great question. Any other questions or comments, please? Feel free. Okay, if there are none, then Karen, I'd like to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I hope I've done it justice. I would once again request for everybody to please fill in the feedback form. The link is in the chat. Perhaps I can copy it again to make it more relevant and more current, but I'd really appreciate that. And once again, thank you to all of you. It's been a pleasure being with you.
Thank you, Abu. That was an absolutely enlightening presentation. I learned a lot. I was trying to find the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen because I wanted to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Which was a very simple one. I think a couple of people have said they really would appreciate more details about the mini camera you talked about at the beginning.
Sure, yes.
If you don't have those, please do send them on to us, and then we can put it up with the recording. That would be really handy.
Yeah, no problem.
So thank you again for, as I said, a really enlightening, I'm shrinking and growing tall to get my position right on the camera.
Yeah.
And there's a lot for us to work on. And I think it was so straightforward and simple and really easy for all of us to be able to understand. So thank you so much, Abu. Really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your kind comments. I've just seen a question up here, and I'll take that if I may. Linda Chamberlain says, could you please show camera positions again? So Linda, the simple answer is that with a camera, you want to have the camera placed at your eye level. So if I point directly at the camera now and I take my arm straight, my hand straight back, it's in level with my eyes. And that way, together with the distance you're at, gives you just enough for you to see the person nicely, not for them to be right in your face and not to be too far back so they're very small, but in a nice position where you can see enough and you can engage with them. But the most important thing with cameras, unfortunately, you're not doing that right now, is that it should be at eye level. Thank you. Great. All right, everybody. Thank you once again. Thank you, Karen and Cash and Shannon and the ANLP team. It's been a pleasure. And like I said, unfortunately, I don't have any slides. Otherwise, I'd be happy to share them. But if anybody has any questions, then please feel to ask either through ANLP or directly, and I'll be happy to take them. But it's been great seeing you and meeting you all. Thank you very much and have a great day.